Welcome to the 4 Habits podcast, where we help you build relationships that thrive at home, at work, and in life. We're Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, and every week we bring you actionable insights to create meaningful connections and lasting success. So let's dive in.
So today we're going to be having a very interesting conversation about how to come off of autopilot in our relationships and how to bust some of those relationship myths. We're in conversation with Dawn Smith all the way from California. So welcome, Dawn.
I'm so excited to be here this morning for me. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're delighted that you were able to make the time, and we're looking forward to the conversation. But as our audience knows, before we kick off, we really want to give you due recognition. So John's going to share your bio.
Appreciate it.
Always my privilege. All right. So Dawn Smith is the founder and chief disruptor at Whole Life Solutions, known for her bold neuroscience-backed approach to both career transitions and couples coaching. And that's the bit we like. That combo of the two there, life at work, life at home, bringing them together. So with a background in mental health and behavioral science, Dawn specializes in helping high-achieving professionals and couples in crisis navigate massive change, one small intentional habit at a time. She's coached over 1,000 couples and spoken on the TEDx stage about busting outdated relationship myths, and we want to dive into some of those.
Yes.
So whether she's writing for the Gottman Institute or keynoting for global organizations like Oracle and UNICEF, Dawn's mission is clear: disrupt the status quo and empower people to create connection that actually works in real life. Through her work, she helps leaders build intimacy, navigate conflict, and stop doing relationships on autopilot. Every conversation with her is practical, powerful, and packed with insight.
And those are some of the insights that we're diving into now.
Love it. I love it. Thank you for that amazing intro.
Well, Dawn,
it's all you.
It's all you. And you've been called a relationship disruptor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm guessing that's a good thing. Tell us, what does that mean to you? And why do you think disruption is needed right now?
Oh, well, yes, I think I'm a big fan of misfits and disruptors, right? So I think part of that actually comes from my ADHD, which I'm very open about, is that I think one thing with those of us who have in high levels of ADHD is we constantly look at the traditional systems and go, why? Why are we supposed to do it that way? Why has it always been done that way? So yes, I'm a big fan of, if we look at our constructs and then we decide, no, I actually really appreciate the tradition and this version of it. Absolutely. Whatever you choose is right for you, but just make sure it's an intentional choice and not something that you're falling into because that's the way it's always been done. That's how I feel about it. I think I missed another piece of your question. I'm sorry.
No, it was why the disruptor? What do you find yourself disrupting in the relationship world?
Yeah. So I think, as you know, I speak and write on these relationship myths that I think so many of us have been brought up with. And I think for a lot of us, they're just things we took for granted. Things like relationships are about compromise, or, you should never go to bed angry, right? Or intimacy is going to fade quickly once you're married, or right? Like these things that I feel like we just accept. That was just the given.
Yeah.
But why?
Good question.
I do think it's a ripe time on this planet, not to get too much on my high horse, but I feel like this goes into every aspect of society, at least in the States, is like, why does education need to be the way it's always been? Why do housing structures need, right? There's so many things that are just baseline, probably not the way they still should be. And kind of need an overhaul and need us to just look at it intentionally and go, are we sure we want to replicate this?
Indeed.
Right?
Life has changed so much over the last few decades, and speeding up in the rate of change.
Yes.
Just start with the internet and AI and how mobile we are in the way that we work compared to just 10 years ago, pre-COVID.
Absolutely.
So much has changed, so we need to update some models. But you picked on three really big myths. Can you just walk us through some of those?
I would love to.
Yeah, what was it? Why do we assume intimacy will fade?
Yes.
I've forgotten the other two already, but they were good
Yes.
ones.
So the one about compromise, and then the
Yes.
one about why you should never
Yeah.
go to bed angry. So
That's
yes,
one.
I'm
Yeah.
happy to walk through them. So I'll start with the intimacy one. I think, yes, relationships evolve over time. I'm not denying that. I think there is an evolution, and you can move from this sort of sparked excitement, lusting honeymoon phase into something that's more kind of solid and more foundational and more just a different type of intimacy. So I'm not denying that part. But I notice a lot of times with the couples I'm working with, that's one of the foundational things they're coming for, are intimacy issues, right? And the irony and the sort of bittersweetness of it for me is that almost universally, they want the same thing.
Yeah.
Both
Yeah.
want to have more intimacy. They both want a deeper physical connection, right? But they're not doing it.
Yeah.
And there's no reason not to do it. There's the classic, we're so busy and life is so overwhelming and we're so tired. Okay, then schedule time. Make it exciting. Yeah, I'm a fan of scheduling sex. If that's what it's going to take because you're being intentional about it, then or what I think is a better idea is make sure you're scheduling romantic dates, exciting dates. Setting up situations so that it's kind of the most organic way that you can rebuild that energy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of the suggestions I give all my couples is take turns planning the date. It's tiny, but what happens with that subtle shift is that instead of it being like, oh, it's Friday, do you want to grab tacos, at our usual spot, right? It becomes something that each of you can look forward to, get a little excited about. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it's just kind of building that spark back in and creating that energy.
Which is what you used to do at the very beginning.
Absolutely.
You used to do things that were great to look forward to, something that everybody could build anticipation,
Right.
excitement in, and then we just stop.
And I think that's an example of something where we fall off because there's an expectation of falling off. And then with the neuroscience piece of it, once you rewire your brain in a certain pattern, right, that becomes the default.
Yeah.
And it can be tricky to sort of rewrite. All of this is about rewriting our scripts, right?
Yeah.
Rewriting these worn down scripts. So just to kind of go on that tangent for just a moment, but what I love about this is that when you choose to do it differently, consciously, intentionally, you set up a schedule, you decide on this, it's very difficult at first. It'll feel like so awkward and unnatural because you're so used to falling back into default. But it is in your prefrontal cortex that you're making these new choices. And on an average of 66 days, which is why we usually build 90-day plans so we can get over that hurdle, in an average of about 2 months, it moves to a different part of your brain. So you no longer have to every day go, oh, this is so hard. Why are we doing this? Is this worth it? No, it stops.
Yeah.
And then that's your new normal.
That's your new intentional autopilot to
yes.
some metaphors there.
That you wrote for yourself.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Right. And so sometimes this means breaking generational patterns of what relationships look like, of what the expectations are, right? Yeah. Even from things like, are we going to choose the same religion? Are we going to bring our children up in this same thing? Sure, if that's what you intentionally choose, not to default. That's my thing. Just don't default.
And one of the defaults I'm sure you're seeing, well, I'd love to know how much of this is coming up in your couple counseling, is the default around roles and responsibilities, especially at home with the chores. Well, you're saying yes. Do you want to tell us? That's the script a lot of us need to rewrite because the work-life balance has shifted for both partners. But tell us what you're seeing.
It has. I will say on that one, for the most part, I don't see it along strictly gender lines anymore or anything like that. So I do think, well, on the one hand, I think couples are pretty good about kind of taking on different things for each other. That said, at some point, whether it's 6 months in or 10 years in, things almost always feel off balance for one or both people. And the irony is sometimes it feels off balance for both people. But that's because they never kind of sat down and consciously figured out. It's like when you're dating, it's exciting to go, oh, I love to cook. I'm happy to cook for you. And the other person's like, oh, I don't mind doing dishes. Great. And then you don't realize that's going to be the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's not
So
what you signed up for, right?
I find it, I don't know if I've even ever seen an exception to this. I don't know if I've ever seen a couple that before they moved in together, they sat down with a piece of paper, wrote down all the chores and responsibilities, and decided who's going to do what. But I'm a big fan of that. I think it's, again, it's the intentionality around it so that you can see things that are, you know, where the burden is. And then also when you change positions, somebody loses their job, there's a life circumstance, you need to revisit.
Indeed.
100%. We're absolutely on that page, that seasons of life
Yeah.
conversation, where once things change, got to have that conversation again. Otherwise, people get frustrated. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying about timing, because clearly you've spoken to lots of couples over the years. Is there a time frame that people come to you typically at where they say, actually, you know what, things feel a little bit dry now. The intimacy's gone out of this relationship. Is there some sort of time frame? Because, well, I'll ask the question first and then we can go on from there. But what are you seeing typically?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Thank you. So my focus, I moved from premarital counseling to doing actually coaching for couples in crisis, because around the time of the pandemic, more and more people started to come to me who were really struggling.
Yeah.
And so I shifted gears. And so now when couples come to me, it's almost universally for three things: trust issues, communication issues, intimacy issues. Often all three, right?
Yeah. One leads to the other, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's amazing to me is how often some of my couples have been together years and years
Yep.
and never had the truly deep conversations on what they want this to look like, what partnership even means to them, what they want to create together. And when it comes to trust, people often ask me, is it really possible, if there's been a betrayal or even a perceived betrayal, is it really possible to get back to trusting each other? I don't want to minimize that, because sometimes it's next to impossible, but a lot of times, not only is it possible, but it's often better than it ever was, because you're forced to have these if you want to do that and you're serious about it, you're forced to have these conversations that they've often never had before.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, when do they come to me? It's not sort of a time frame of like within the first year or within 10. I mean, I have couples that have been together 30, 40 years. I have couples that were married 3-4 months ago. But they're at that critical crossroads. Almost universally, couples are coming to me saying, we don't know if our problems are foundational or fixable. That's the biggest question.
Yeah, no, I was intrigued because I was wondering if you were going to, well, certainly, I'm glad that you've busted the myth of the 7-year itch, where a lot of people say, oh, they think it's 7 years, and after 7 years, the wheels come off. In our experience, 7 years is just another number. It can happen much earlier than that, can happen much, much later than that.
Absolutely.
In fact, a lot of the experience we have is that where couples have children and the children are kind of no longer the main focus.
They're not dependent.
Even if they're still at house, they're no longer the main focus, where you've got to have all your attention on them. Now you've got a bit more spare time. Now it's time to look around and like, oh, okay, what else do we have here? And that's when the wheels start to come off for a lot of the couples that we work with.
That's true. Yeah, that's a really, I'll flip the tables on you. Yeah. So when you work at couples at that crossroads, what is your main sort of advice, or how do you walk them through figuring out if they still have what it takes?
Usually it's about the conversations that should have happened a long time ago that haven't happened yet. And well, when we talk about the 4 habits, there are 4 kind of key areas of interactions that can cause real relational tension. And each of the 4 habits addresses one of those. At this stage, quite often it's either around different personality and work style approaches that has been misunderstood for a long time and got to the point of real irritation or frustration, the way they deal with conflict, which stuff just never got spoken about, and a lot of times assumptions or beliefs that are different between the couple, and they never voiced it.
Yes.
But kept feeling maybe disrespected, unheard, broken trust, and that just created an ever increasing emotional distance till it got to crisis point. So it's usually, and the fourth one is they're all not feeling valued or appreciated in a way that matters to them. So somewhere, one of those four will show up with an emphasis on one or on all four or something in between.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's usually the point.
It's powerful work.
So tell us about the myth of not going to bed angry, because that's a really interesting one. What are you seeing?
Yes. So that's the one my TED Talk was about. So I want to clarify first, I'm not telling couples they should go to bed angry. That's not
good point.
But it's a myth that we should try to resolve things in an effective way later in the day when things have already devolved. And so there's a lot of layers to that. So one of the things that I think you're kind of referencing when you're talking about people never having kind of figured out that they're coming from these different constructs, right? So men and women process and communicate differently from a neuroscience perspective, right? And of course, it's a spectrum. I see it even with my same-sex couples, but we tend to be drawn to our counterpart. And so one person who compartmentalizes more, one who makes all these different connections and, maybe is more of the organizer, planner, nurturer, and the other's more like the grounded decision maker, quick decision maker. And one tends to need space when things escalate, and the other tends to need to want to talk things out. And if that's not worked through, things escalate quickly. And once we're dysregulated, there is no critical thinking capacity. The other piece of it is we have about 2 hours of critical thinking capacity per day. That's it. And it usually starts kicking in about 90 minutes after we wake up. So there's virtually no chance that at bedtime you're able to calmly and critically think things through and come up with solutions. So what I say is, if you're in that space, recognize it, label it, maybe have a sign or a mantra to let your partner know, I care about you, I love you, and we're going to have this conversation at X time in the morning, really being specific about it, so that the one who has what we call the spaghetti brain, who makes all these connections and usually is the one who wants to talk things out, doesn't feel abandoned, right? Doesn't feel like this will never have resolution. So being confident about that.
We like to talk about, maybe go to sleep, park it and go to sleep so you can wake up with fresh energy and fresh manners. Because
I love that. Fresh manners. I love that.
There's some manners that will go. That's brilliant. And Dawn, tell us some of the work that you're doing on the corporate side. What are the issues that you're seeing? What are the things that they're needing your help to understand and unpack and maybe resolve?
So my coaching work is mostly one-on-one with people navigating transitions. The talks are more corporate talks, and the topics go back to this: how do we deal with really intense, stressful transition points without getting overwhelmed, right? So anytime I'm dealing with people who are at these sort of crisis transitional points, it comes down to this neuroscience of habits. And one of the sort of misconceptions, I think, when we're going through a transition is, we really need to dive in and figure this all out. And really the more effective way is to take it one tiny concrete step, a few minutes at a time. And it actually almost kind of tricks that brain wiring that falls back into the old pattern to go, okay, I can handle that one little thing, right? And then it sort of snowballs. So it's actually faster and more efficient to do one tiny concrete thing towards this transition a day than to try to take on these giant things at once. Because if we do that, our brains tend to get overwhelmed and then we go, oh my gosh, it's too much. Never mind. Let's go back to the old way.
What does that look like in practice?
I was going to ask for example.
What does that look like? One example. We're on the same page here.
Right. Okay. So it's easy to describe if you're talking about somebody going through job transition, right? So if you're going through a major shift in your career, rather than saying, well, you have to approach this as your new job and you have to sit there and go for 8 hours a day. I'm not saying you can only spend 10 or 20 minutes a day, but if it's learning something new or reaching out to somebody that you're scared to reach out to, right? Or sending a message or training yourself on something, then I really recommend set a timer. What we find is it's about 20 minutes that your brain can really take on this new thing, even if it's scary and it pushes your boundaries. I don't know if you two are familiar. There's a concept about that has to do with our comfort zones, where there's comfort zone, learning edge, and then danger or panic zone. Are you familiar with that? Yeah. So we only grow outside of our comfort zone, right? It's the only place we can take in new information, learn, push ourselves, and rewrite these scripts. But if you push yourself too far too fast, you enter that danger or panic zone, and then you revert, often back further than you even were to begin with.
Yeah, shrink your comfort zone.
Yeah, so it's really counterproductive. And so that, I'm not saying if you're, embracing a new thing, you can't spend a couple hours on it. But that piece of what are those things that are truly pushing your comfort zone, that you're nervous to do, that feel overwhelming, that feel really intense. Well, you set a vision of what the ideal looks like. You set this big goal, and then you do these tiny, tiny steps every day.
Yeah, that move you in that direction.
What are the example of one of these tiny steps? If
Sure.
Work setting, for example.
I'm going to draft an email and send it to 3 people I don't know who I think have some wisdom for me, right? Or I'm going to read an article to teach myself this new thing. Or I'm going to do, an online class, but I'm only going to do one little lesson of it, right? Something like that. I'm going to stretch myself to ask so-and-so for help, right? Those are examples of the kinds of things.
Yeah.
And in a home setting, just flipping back to that for a moment, any examples from there?
From where?
From a domestic setting, from a couple relationship.
Oh, absolutely. From an intimacy standpoint, we're going to brainstorm 10 things that we could try, right? That kind of thing. Let's find 3 new places that we could go. Right. So I think, and I see this with conflict resolution too, is there's this sense that, let's say there's a problem of feeling like communication is really lacking. We're really struggling. One of us shuts down, the other, right? Like we just can't have these big conversations. They don't go anywhere. And then there's this sense that if we are going to sit down and talk about it, we have to solve the whole thing. We have to become better communicators. No. You can set one piece of the puzzle and say, you know what, let's try that on Thursdays at 4, we will decide one thing about next steps in a 30-minute conversation, something like, and we'll just see if that works. Yeah. Right. So I like to think of the big issue, if it's intimacy or trust or communication, think of it like a puzzle. And we're only solving for one puzzle piece today. That's it. Right.
Yeah, especially if it feels overwhelming, like a 1,000-piece puzzle. Just, you get this sense of success if you can find one piece that fits in.
Yeah, if you feel like you can't trust your partner and you feel like you've been betrayed and you feel like we're going to sit down and talk until, you've probably seen this with your couples, but when there's been betrayal or even perceived betrayal, the one who feels betrayed often will ask the same questions over and over and over and over again, hoping it'll kind of fill in the blanks and make more sense. And that can become so exhausting for the other person because sometimes they feel like they really have given all the information. They don't know what else to do. It gets really helpless. So instead of sitting down and saying, we have to talk until I have the full picture and I know that I can trust you again, that's not realistic. Then maybe you sit down and you say, I can ask you 3 questions and then we go have a nice dinner, right? And we'll do more tomorrow. Something like that.
Yeah.
Right size. Love that. So if those are the 3 issues, just again, circling back to that of trust, communication, and intimacy, what in a flipping back to the work setting, the office environment, what issues are you seeing there? What people, I know that's slightly different type of crisis. This is now, you said it's about role transition, career transition, etc. What are the issues people are generally facing there?
Yeah. So overwhelm. right? Just the anxiety and the stress. And I think that can lead to a lot of brain fog and just not knowing how to get clarity on what the next steps are. In that model, one of the people I go back to, even though it's so classic, but Stephen Covey, right? The 7 Habits, really was a life book, right? And really the heart of that book was prioritizing the important over the urgent.
Indeed. Yeah.
And so I think, again, this comes back to our scripts of like, wait a minute, what actually matters to me? And how do I decide from that place? One of the things I suggest is brain dumping every single thing that's on your mind that needs to get done in no particular order. And it can even be a home life, relationships, work, all of it, because just because we're at work doesn't mean we're forgetting about everything else that's on our minds that we're supposed to be doing, especially in these stressful times, right? My son's school burned down. So while I'm working, I might be thinking, okay, what needs to happen there, right? So that doesn't compartmentalize just because we're in one setting. So one of the exercises I love, it's so simple, it takes 5 minutes and it works, is brain dump everything that's swimming around your head and probably feels like equal priority that needs to get done. And then walk through and rank it, but rank it based on what's important. Urgent things can come on there too. But start from that mindset of, I'm not just going to do what other people need me to do. And I'm going to, and I like to do like A+, A minus, B+, right? And just rank your list and then assign just your A+ and maybe your A's. Give them an actual time in your planner, even if it's a 5-minute task. Lay them out. It takes 5 minutes and it can be so helpful to us going, oh my gosh, okay, wait, it's not all equal priority. And if I knock out these 5 things today, I'm going to feel so much more on top of things.
Indeed. It's just being able to have the space for the things that matter, have them scheduled in the calendar. Yeah, we like to talk about scheduling based on your values rather than your to-do list, because
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's it.
The to-do list will always scream as if everything had equal priority, and they don't. We're so in sync with this, Dawn.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to frame it. It's so true. Yeah.
Based on value.
And ritualize the things that matter to you.
Yeah. Make
Right.
sure
That was from Covey too, is schedule the big rocks first.
Indeed.
Don't wait till everything is off your list to fit them in. You'll never fit them in.
Yeah. They won't work. If we go back to that wonderful line, take your relationships off autopilot. What is it that you would want the audience to do? If you were to say, I don't know, 3 things or 5 things, think about these things in particular. What is it that you'd want them to get off of autopilot about?
Oof, yes. Well, I think we just hit on the first one, which is if you're feeling like there's this lack in these areas, schedule time on a calendar on a regular basis to do those things that becomes non-negotiable, right? If a work thing comes up, you say, I'm sorry, I'm booked for an appointment at that time. And that's true. You have an appointment with your partner or whatever, or with yourself. Ritualize those things, make them non-negotiable. One of the other things, it's the myth that I didn't get to talk about yet, which is the compromise one. So to me, so many of us, that was a baseline. Relationships are all about compromise. I think compromise is almost a dirty word, because by definition, it means that both of you are sort of sacrificing and giving up what you actually want. So I think this goes back to the sort of creative problem solving and questioning and rewriting the script. If you sit down and you approach this as a unit, as a team, and you say, okay, instead of my way or your way, could we come up with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other ideas that we had not thought of that work for us as a unit? And choose one of those instead. So it's a little bit of semantics, but I think it's an important mindset shift.
It totally is. We like to talk about this example of a father with two sons and a cupcake, and they wanted to share the cupcake, and one son volunteered to cut the cupcake in half, and the dad said, yes, you can cut it, but your brother is going to choose the first piece. So, you know, the precision to try and give as little as possible and get as much as possible, or make sure you don't lose out. That's what happens when we go with a compromise mindset where both people lose out.
That's
But
right.
if we have richer conversations about what really matters to you, we might find that we can both truly win.
Yeah. And I think the last piece I'd say for your couples is define what ideal partnership really looks like and feels like to you.
Yeah.
And then sit down with your partner and actually craft out a plan. Like start not from scratch, because you know each other and that's a beautiful thing, but what if we could build something, you know, better, more exciting, more appreciative? That's the big one, right? And that's from Gottman too, is that foundationally you can say it's communication, it's trust, it's intimacy, it's respect, but foundationally it's often we don't feel heard or appreciated, and that's what's causing all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So what does that ideal look like? And then work on little steps to craft your ideal.
Correct it. Yeah. You know, it's a great place to kind of be ending where we started, this idea of being very intentional. What does good look like for you, and how can we build it together? And what are the behaviors that are not serving us, that we will want to do things differently, patterns that we've developed because of somebody else's script? How can we be more intentional about our own? Love it.
That.
But I want to play just quickly before we wrap. Just, I guess it's playing the devil's advocate a little bit here.
Your favorite.
Like doing this. It makes this intentional bit, and we talk about that a lot, but it can make relationships feel like hard work. Even the bit about you know what, you didn't call it date night, but essentially taking it in turns to choose something that we're going to do each week. You know, it's easier to default, well, the other person is better at this than me, why don't they do it, kind of thing. How do you encourage the lazy people? And this is me talking personally now. How do you encourage us to say, guys, you just got to do this thing? I know it feels like hard work, and, you know, push forward, push through, and do it.
I love that question. Couple things there. First of all, I actually don't think every single date needs to be taking turns. So if, for example, you're able to commit time every other week, twice a month, to a date, then one of those you take turns alternating, right? So then you're only doing one every other month that you're planning something. And the other one can be that casual, let's get together with friends, or let's go to the corner and get our favorite thing to go, or watch a movie at home. That's fine, right? I think there needs to be room for that. But when we're talking about building in the intimacy and the romance, right? So one every other month.
That's
and
good.
then what's that?
I said, that's good.
Yeah. The other piece to your point is often I do have couples get an actual physical calendar to put in the house, to just have those handful of things that are the meaningful, ritualized things for them, right? Time to sit down and talk through this once a week, time with finances, time for the date stuff, right? Whatever are these things that are super meaningful to them. And I preface it by saying, hey, we're trying to strike that balance where your lives are already busy. And I don't want you to feel like this is adding burden and overscheduling. I want it to be the things where knowing that they have a place and time is going to actually feel like a relief. It's actually going to feel like less pressure. Your partner's not going to be nagging you all the time. When are we going to have this meeting? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't this working? So you want to strike that balance where it's just enough that the payoff actually creates a more of a sense of freedom, actually, and gives room for that spontaneity.
Indeed. I used to say, you know, spontaneity is great, but it's not a great life strategy.
I like planned spontaneity.
Exactly.
Let's have third Sunday of the month. We block off every third Sunday and do whatever the hell we want that day, right? I'm a fan of spontaneity.
No, absolutely. We have that as well, and we do. You know, we'll have days where it's just pajama days, you know, and
I love it.
Put them in
And
diary. Plan it, because if you leave it as just a blank space in the diary, well, guess what? Something will come up, and it'll end up being taken up, and you don't end up with that time. So, Absolutely. No, but thank you for commenting on that. I was just being devil's advocate there,
I love
because
it.
there are a lot of people who will sit there saying, look, life is busy, life is stressed, we're already pressured, you're just giving me more things to do here. But I think the suggestion of pace it, time it, doesn't have to be every week. You have your sort of casual things that you just do anyway, but every now and again put some plan in there that just gives it it's back to what you were saying earlier. It's what you would have done when you were first dating, or when there was that
That's
genuine
true.
interest in each other. You found the time to do it then.
When there was that
Genuine interest,
Oh,
you want to keep it alive and you want to keep having the fun. You've got to do. There is going to be some work. It's not all autopilot. You sit in all
yeah.
autopilot, well, you're going to get the results that come from that, unfortunately.
That will, as we always say, nothing, things tend to chaos when they're left on their own on
Yes.
autopilot. If
Yes.
you want great, you have to be intentional about
Yes.
making that happen.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Now, amazing. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you thought before you came on the call you'd love to share this with the audience, or you want to leave them thinking about this? What would that be?
Sure. I'll say two things. One is that anytime you're making these changes, if you're really being intentional, it's going to feel awkward. So lean into the awkwardness, right? Both of you need to acknowledge that, well, I'm assuming a 2-person partnership, but however many need to lean into the awkwardness. Just know that it's going to take some trial and error, right? Anytime we're doing something new, it's going to take some trial and error. The other thing goes back to the appreciation thing. So, Gottman and their team found this magic ratio, right? The 5-to-1. And I think that's a really, really important thing that I want people to understand. Our brains are wired for negativity bias. I mean, that goes back to cave days, right? We're wired to notice the things that feel off or bad or dangerous or not working. And so, Gottman and his team found it takes 5 positives to balance everything that feels critical. And interestingly, Harvard Business did the same study in the workplace, and their statistic was virtually identical.
Oh, really?
5.2 versus 5.4, I think.
Wow.
Positives to balance every critical. So sometimes couples come to me and they're like, ugh, she's so negative all the time. And the other person's like, I literally just told you how nice you look as we were coming here, right? Yep. Both are true. Because if it's even 50-50, it's going to feel way off balance. And so the way to counter that is, instead of constantly going, am I being too negative? Am I doing, build in the positive. Have a ritual of saying 3 things you appreciate about your partner every day. Will it feel weird and awkward? Maybe. Is it going to make things better? Absolutely.
Yeah, that's such a brilliant note to end on, because as you say, we're wired for negativity. It's so easy to give constructive feedback or how you can improve, but never being intentional about making sure we're hitting the 5. We're doing the things that will land well.
And that 5 is just the average. Because if you're married to somebody like Andrea is 55. So there are other people down there at 0 and -5 and -10. But I've just got to keep just loading up on the. It might feel like that sometimes for some people, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
Exactly.
We talk about you've probably come across this, the 5 love languages, or the 5 languages of appreciation. Mine is words. So insatiable.
Yes.
Insatiable. Now, amazing. Dawn, it's been riveting, as we knew it would be. And there, we could just keep going with the conversation, but we're conscious of time.
Yes.
How can people find you and get hold of what you offer, some of the services that you offer?
I appreciate that. Thank you. So it's relationshipcoachdawn.com, and the career coaching is at wholelifesolutions.biz. Okay. And on both of them, you can schedule a free consult, and we can chat and see if the services are a right fit.
Awesome.
Well, we will put those in the show notes to make sure people have the right spellings and so on. But thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. Sorry, I've had to be the advocate every now and again.
I love it. Important. Again, all of this is about questioning the baseline. So it's important to ask the questions. I love it.
And these are the questions on people's minds. Certainly, the conversations we have, people are thinking these things and sometimes not asking the question. So
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
love doing that bit there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Dawn. Thank you for the time and for just your energy and enthusiasm, a clear passion for doing relationships intentionally and not just sliding along in life on autopilot. How can we create the life that we really want together?
Thank you so much. It's been such a joy. Clearly, you two have the same passion for supporting people to have the best dynamics they can possibly have. So it's been such a pleasure.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed.
And
we always say we're learning ourselves, so we want to, get as much knowledge and understanding ourselves so we can benefit and so we can share it with others as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, as we say goodbye to our audience around the world, thanks for being with us yet again for another fascinating insight. Who knows who we're going to have next week? We'll see where the conversation takes us. But for now, it's a wrap. Thank you, Dawn. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks for tuning in to the 4 Habits podcast. Now, if today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, take our free relationship skills quiz at the4habits.com/skills quiz to start improving your relationships today. Hit subscribe and we'll see you next time.